We're missing Councilmember Iyer, but we'll go ahead and get our meeting started. My name is Mike Remington. I'm a City Council member and Mayor Pro Tem for City of Duval. And we'll call to order our City Council Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. It's now 5:33. On our agenda tonight, we have three main items. One is department updates. We have a police department transition update from Chief Hurt, and two of his command staff are here this evening. Our second item is comparable cities salary study. We had hired a consultant to look at comparable cities. We're going into negotiations with, is it right? Two unions, Mayor, this next year. And so one of the key steps is looking at our comparables and deciding what those are. And then our final item is our 2021-2022 revenue projections from our finance department. This afternoon, we received a update on revenues and expenditures, and it was nice to have. We do have Councilmember Iyer with us now. So with that, we'll get started. The first item is good of the order. Council members, is there anything you'd like to share this evening? Or staff? Jody, our city clerk, Jody Wyckoff.
I wanted to let you guys know that due to the different hours of the King County Library here in town, the library board has changed their monthly meetings from the first Monday to the first Tuesday of each month. And I will be updating the website to show that. And I believe that the majority of their meetings are virtual, but they wanted to let the public know that of that change.
Thank you, Jody. Councilmember Naplin.
Hi, I just wanted to report that I had a couple meetings that had to do with internet access, broadband, and I met with virtually Chris Jaramillo with King County Office of Cable Communications. I also met with Kathy Lambert and Jackie White, who is on her staff, who works on broadband issues and works a lot with the community in the unincorporated. So she does something similar that Mayor Okerlander does when people have concerns. She'll connect them to WAVE and try to help reach some resolution. So I had a great conversation with them. We're super excited that WAVE is coming to the next meeting, and they expressed interest in listening into that meeting and kind of trying to understand what our issues are. I also, I happened to be talking to Mayor Okerlander the other day and, brainstormed that it'd be great to have input from the community of questions they might want us to ask WAVE, and we could pull those questions together, and if we find common ground, try to find a way to get the community questions asked and answered. So Mayor Okerlander was very open to that. So I just wanted to give an update on that. Today was first day of remote schooling for most kids in this district, and we definitely had technology glitches in my household of 3 kids. And so anything we can do to advocate for robust internet service is something we're working towards. So anyway, that's my report.
Great, Jennifer, thank you. It really is, especially if you look at the Duval discussion board, one of the key discussions out there is internet connectivity, especially during COVID-19, people working from home, running businesses, their school-age children doing studying. So it's just, it's a key issue. And I know that our internet providers are working hard trying to solve some of the issues we have. And one of the steps we had as a city council was to ask them to come and talk with us, make sure that we could express the concerns, but also be able to express how we can work together and try to, at the end of the day, we just want the best service we can get for our city. And that's our goal. It would be nice to get that out to as many of our citizens. I think this evening it looks like we have some citizens that are participating online with us. We have 4 attendees, but I'm sure that we, out of 7,000, 8,000 residents, have quite a few that would like to join that meeting, our next meeting on September 15th, our committee of the whole, to be able to hear from WAVE and make sure that we as council are adequately sharing some of the concerns and doing what we can to move forward better service. Other council members, Mayor, did I see you had your hand up? Is that right?
No, didn't have my hand up.
Okay. Anyone else? Councilmember Langle.
Thanks, everyone. This is just something for us to think about. Is that I noticed that one of the things in the finance director's job description is council needing to make a decision or may make a decision about the frequency with which the finance director makes a presentation to us on the financial status of a particular year. And that wouldn't just be things like the financial projections we're going to see tonight, but it would also be a presentation of, for example, the quarterly reports, so that we would have an opportunity to at least ask questions after receiving the report. And so I'm throwing that out right now as something, we don't have to talk about it tonight, but I think it's something we should talk through, at least consider for the next biennium, if not in September. But at least for 21, 22, you know, getting a little more refinement around that now that we have very consistent finance reports. So it is something that we have the opportunity to do, the right to do, and it would give everything a little more structure.
Yeah, I can speak up to that, Councilmember Lingle. I have absolutely no issue with that. You know, previously, historically, councils just wanted them electronically. And so,
Yeah.
you know, I think that goes in line with administration's goals of making our budget and our finances more transparent to the community. It shouldn't be too difficult to do. I mean, the reality is the finance director doesn't need to do a big PowerPoint presentation. We can literally go through page by page of the report without having to reinvent the wheel and essentially go over the report and answer questions. So that's not a problem. We can definitely do that and add that to committees of the whole in the future.
Yeah, I just think even the opportunity, I mean, it's incumbent on all of the council members to be looking at those reports and preparing some questions. Even that would be, you know, from a time standpoint, I want to be respectful of the director's time, but, you know, so I think sometimes everybody would benefit from the questions that others might have. So thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll get that on a future Cal. I think that'd be important to us. And I don't see any other good of the order. So we'll move on to our item 1, which is department updates. And we have Police Chief Hurt with us this evening. And Chief, if you could introduce your staff for our citizens that may be watching this later or online this evening.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Kerry Hurt, Police Chief. I would like to welcome Lieutenant Mike DeBach and Lieutenant Steve Saborn. Over the last several weeks, we've had an opportunity to meet with all council members individually to discuss a police transition plan as we go into the next biennium. Tonight won't be a whole lot of new information. It's more so just a refresher for everyone and bring everybody together. You've all had a couple weeks to think about what you had heard and maybe develop more questions, and that's kind of what tonight's about. I do have just a quick, probably 9-slide presentation if I can try and share the screen here. Can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, again, this is just going to be a refresher for most of you, well, all of you except staff. So you heard me talk a lot over the last couple of years about succession planning and why it's important in organizations. Clearly, it identifies future leaders of an organization, creates structured training and development for those future leaders. It helps the organization plan for long-term operations. It creates a disaster-proof organization from unexpected events. And I guess what I mean by that is if something bad were to happen to someone in a leadership position, having effective succession planning ensures that there's always someone ready and willing and able to step into that position and keep the continuity of the operations moving forward. And in the long run, it saves cities and organizations money. You don't have the external recruiting costs, the additional training, and bringing someone in from the outside who spends several months trying to learn not only their department, but the community and everyone involved in all that. So that's what, these are what we believe are important steps for succession planning. The Duval succession plan over the last 4 years included structure change, providing for 2 lieutenants starting in 2016. In 2018, it included structural changes for providing 2 patrol sergeants. And it also provided opportunity to develop leadership and management of our lieutenants. It gave them an opportunity to learn both aspects of our operations, both patrol and administration. It provided for direct supervision of police staff by providing sergeants specifically on night shift. It also provided focused training for all 4 of our up-and-coming managers. It provided focused delegation of duties and assignments for our up-and-coming managers, and it provided for up-and-coming managers to learn all aspects of our organization. Now, obviously, there's still a lot to learn, and we will be doing a lot more of that over the next 10 months period. The results of this succession plan is I will be retiring from law enforcement in June of next year. The city has 2 trained, qualified candidates ready to replace and ease this transition. We've eliminated the time and costs associated with external recruitment, and we've provided for continued structural change opportunities in our organization. Ultimately, what it does is it results in good retention. People come to organizations and they stay because of opportunity. So with this, my recommendation moving forward is that Lieutenant DeBach will transition as your next police chief. Lieutenant Saborn will continue in his role as a middle manager, and he will continue focus training and development to replace Chief DeBach when the time comes. The vacant position created through this transition will be replaced with an entry-level officer at a substantial cost savings. I'm going to take these next 3 slides and turn it over to Lieutenant DeBach to describe what the structure for the next biennium will look like. Go ahead, Lieutenant.
Hello, everyone. This is Lieutenant DeBach, Duval Police. As we move into 2021 and Chief Hurt goes into retirement, the structure of the police department will change. It won't be a drastic change, though. It'll go from a police chief to a middle manager, 2 patrol sergeants, and then 8 patrol officers. We'll still have a school resource officer and, of course, our records manager with Shelley Rowe at the police department. The following year in 2022, the police department will continue its succession planning by creating 2 additional positions of MPOs or corporals. So you'll have a police chief, a middle manager, 2 patrol sergeants, and then those 2 new positions are, they're called master police officers or corporal positions. And you'll still have 6 officers, 1 school resource officer, and then the records manager. And then why the structural change in 2022? This is our next step in providing development opportunities to our patrol staff. And it begins the succession training for the first line leadership or supervision roles. It helps management identify future leaders and their abilities, helps officers determine whether or not supervision is for them. These 2 corporal positions are basically like a shift supervisor. They don't have disciplinary authority, but they make the decisions on the shift. They go to the calls, they help officers, they help mentor, they help coach. And then when something arises, they are the first line of contact for either the sergeants or the lieutenant or myself if something happens. It helps like I said, it helps them determine whether or not they want to be supervisors before we spend a lot of money and training and time invested in these people, and for them to realize they don't want to do that type of position. It allows management to focus training dollars on department needs geared towards continued succession for our department.
Thank you, Lieutenant DeBach. This next slide is my last slide. I know that we have a lot of folks that are numbers driven. I do want to put out the caveat that two caveats actually. The numbers you're going to see do not reflect cost of living increases for 2021 or 2022, and they are not exact. These numbers still have to be verified through our finance department. And what I want to show you is the variance from our current structure moving into the new structure with myself retiring and going to a one lieutenant structure with 2 corporals coming in 2022. Give you some time to digest it. The variance is approximately $160,000 over the biennium.
So Chief, we've had an opportunity to take a look at the chart here. Do you have more to share, or is it open for questions?
That is the end of the presentation, Mayor Pro Tem. If anyone has questions, we're welcome to those.
So council members, Councilmember Lingle and Mayor Okerlander.
I guess I have just a comment, which is I had the honor of being a founding director, and the decision to leave after approximately 14 years was a lot of soul searching. It took me about a year to make that decision and about 2 years to figure out the transition. And I really appreciate the thought that went into this. And I've already told the chief that I support this transition plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
I just wanted to, express my appreciation for Chief and his lieutenants. Really, especially the last 5 years, there's been a significant amount of work in the department to make sure they have the people at the table that they need, the right people, and that they're continuously investing in their employees. And I think as we see, literally, I have friends in law enforcement that are moving out of state or flat out leaving law enforcement altogether as a result of the things that have been occurring in our country, particularly the last few months. And the fact that our department has been able to come up with this plan and get their folks to support it, and that Chief Hurt has been able to mentor 2 lieutenants to this level is an extraordinary achievement. And I know personally I'm going to miss the police chief, Chief Hurt, immensely. Professionally and personally, and he's really done an unbelievable job with this department. And I can say when unrest started to happen and we started to get emails about defunding the police, whether they meant actually defund or adding social services, regardless, all of the programs that people were bringing up, our department has essentially already done almost every item on the list. And for a small jurisdiction, to be ahead of the curve and be ahead of the larger jurisdictions that have much more significant problems and challenges to deal with is really a testament to the leadership and the professionalism and the dedication to our community of everyone in the police department. So with that, I just want to say that I'm very proud of the work that has been done by this group and fully supportive of the transition plan, even though it's going to break my heart when Chief does retire. Although I know he's got greener pastures ahead as well. So that's what I wanted to share with the group.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Brudnicki.
Well, we have so much history, so there's a lot of things the mayor said that the chief has done extraordinary job in the time I've been around. I'm very impressed with the type of savings we are looking at, but what I'd like to know is with that savings, if we can make sure that would stay in the department, because we do a really good job with our community outreach. I would say we're kind of a model city that way with our safety and with our citizens. And I really think the success of that, we need to continue, and there's going to be changes with, I guess, the public wanting changes and the type of funding that we need to have in order to make those changes happen. I want to make sure that public safety, through the savings, that they can make sure that stays within their department, not just get funneled out somewhere, and they work so hard to do that. So I don't know how that can be done, but I think it's a priority because public safety is very important to this community. So I applaud you for the savings. And so I want to see how we take that sort of investment forward for the department.
Thank you. Other council members that wanted to comment or have questions? I don't see any. I will say Chief is heading up our Public Safety Committee along with Diane Brudnicki and Councilmember McHenry, that we really have truly appreciated you as our police chief. But I realize it's not coming to an end tomorrow. You'll be here through the end of June. So we're going to take full advantage and ride that horse as far as we can. I do want to say, having worked with a lot of law enforcement agencies, both where I worked in Bellevue and the fire department, as well as with Seattle and the FBI and Secret Service and so on over the years, that our personnel here really help define who we are as a police department. I think we have outstanding organizational things set up, including our policies, but it's much more than that. And you see that across the country right now. A lot of the issues that are there, we don't have here in Duval. And it doesn't mean we don't all have room to grow, but I just want to recognize the entire staff. It's a important process who we select. And I'm really proud to have internal folks that are both interested and capable of taking the position. Personally, I have always felt like the best move is to have folks that are ready to step in. You don't always have that. And sometimes you need an organizational change, and that needs to come from the outside. But we're not in that position here, in my own judgment. And we have outstanding folks. They'll have their time of growing and learning and developing, which is hopefully a process that we can all be part of so they can be successful. So thank you for sharing. We understand that these position changes are part of a budget, and council will need to work with the mayor and try to understand how all that fits in. But hopefully we'll have the revenues and be able to make those structural changes that you've recommended. So thank you. Councilmember McHenry.
Just a quick thank you for putting all this together and all your hard work. And I think especially at a time like now where many cities are looking at their departments and thinking, what do we change to make it better? For us, it's more of how do we keep going what we have going so well right now. So I appreciate this proposal, and it's a solid answer to that question. Thank you.
Well, not seeing any other hand. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Langle.
I guess I have just one more. I don't know if I mentioned this at another council meeting, so you can stop me, but our police department is part of a consortium of 13 small cities. And as a reminder, in this state, we set some new goals around police training, de-escalation. Because they work through this consortium, which costs us a very small amount of money every year, we are way ahead, and we'll have that training done far in advance of that schedule. And so I guess in a way, I'm not only acknowledging that involvement in the consortium, but also pointing out that by working in the collective, we actually save a lot of money and we get in compliance a lot faster. And, you know, I don't know if people realize we actually have somebody internally in our department that is well established in de-escalation training. So those are some specifics that I learned in a conversation with Chief Hurt not too long ago. And also in terms of the community policing, Councilmember Brodecki mentioned, I'm familiar with that from past life, and we do a really good job of that. And the person who's bossy about it is Michael DeBrock. But you can only have a success, be part of the succession if you promise not to make fun of my Halloween costume.
Thank you so much. Well, with that, I'm sorry, Councilmember Hogue.
So I'm also in support of what your ideas were going forward. And I'm also in support. I'm really glad that Councilmember Brodnicki brought up if there was a savings, what would happen to it, you know, because I think that would be, I'd like to explore those options of keeping it somehow, trying to figure out how to keep it.
Councilmember Hogue, it looks like computer might have frozen up. You look terrific, but you're not moving. Well, we appreciate your comments. And I'll just ask one last time, are there anyone I missed, staff or council members? Michelle, you're back. We see you moving there. All righty, thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate your comments. So we'll move on to our next item. Thanks again for our police chief and staff for being here with us this evening. You're welcome to stay as long as you like.
Thank you.
Our next item is comparable cities for salary study. We have our consultant, Ross, you're here with us tonight. I'll have you go off mute here. Jody, if you need to help Ross with that.
I'm trying to unmute him on my end. It's not working, so he might have to, hold on. Dying. Oh, shoot, I had it. Try again, Ross. Sorry, I might have remuted you.
For our citizens, as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, if you didn't hear, we have two of our unions that the city will be negotiating with this year as their contracts are coming to an end. So we're looking forward to having that process start. And one of the key elements to that is determining who your comparable cities are. So you can take a look and see how our pay is doing compared to other cities. So Ross, thank you for being here. If you want to introduce yourself for our citizens that are here, tell us just a bit about yourself, and then we can dive into your presentation.
Thank you very much. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you're unmuted.
Good. Excellent. My name's Ross Ardrey. I'm a management consultant for more than almost 50 years now. I'm living, this is Ardrey, and I live over in Everett, right next to the Everett Public Library. And my practice focuses on public sector, especially cities. I do salary studies and compensation, which is salary studies plus benefits. And then every once in a while, something comes along that's a little bit different. In the case of the city of Duval, it was the additional element of workload analysis. And it's been very exciting finding out what a workload analysis is. I've done it for other organizations, and I've found some models now of other cities. So when we get to that part of the study, we've got something to go with other than Ross's previous experience. And that's good. If, do you have on the screen there the picture of the different cities and their demographics?
I can share that right now. Hold on one moment.
So Ross, city council members did receive both the chart as well as I think we had one other page that included population, assessed value, and sales tax comparison. So we have it up on the screen now.
Good, good. This is where we are now, and I got to shut a window. One of the neat things about living in an apartment building is that you've got lots of neighbors. Another thing is that sometimes the neighbors are more robust on their voices than I would want. That chart there is where we are now. It reflects an enormous amount of thinking and effort that's gone into it. Not only me, but especially you folks. The process begins the start of the year when you decided to do a compensation study and you sent out the request for proposal. That was back in February, and it seems so far away now. Before the law enforcement problems, before the COVID problems, before the economic things had surfaced, an awful lot has changed then. But I think our plan is still pretty good. We started off by working with your management team and mayor to refine a project plan that would be participatory and that would endeavor to address the uniqueness of the city of Duval. And as the first step out of that were interviews, not just with a sample of employees, but with every employee. Our target was 100%. And as an additional element, we added introductory calls with the mayor and council to find out their thinking about the city's compensation program and the comparable cities. The interviews with the employees included the management team, especially the Teamsters and the Guild people and the non-rep people. I asked them about their jobs, examples of what they were doing, especially where they came from, where their previous employers were, and what organizations they would put on a list of survey comparables. Traditionally, salary studies have not asked employees about where to look for comparable positions. The studies have built off of demographics. They have looked to population, assessed valuation, and taxes, but not asked the question, what do the employees think? And not asked the question, where do employees come from? So that was part of our study. Part of our interviews was to find out what the employees thinking, because the end product of any good salary program, any good compensation program, and any good workload process is to enhance recruitment, retention, and the services provided to the community. So we did the interviews, and thank you very much for being on the other end of the telephone and giving me the chance to listen to you for 20, 40 minutes, things like that. And also did follow-up interviews where employees thought that they might have forgotten something, or very likely the consultant didn't pick up on something. So we did that part, and then we started looking to the key question, which was, what cities do you look at? And all of you in the interviews were super helpful in saying that it's going to be very difficult for the city of Duval to identify comparable cities, because there's so much that's unique to the way you are. And you were helpful enough to tell me which cities you thought should be on the list of the ones to look at. And I took that information and used that as a basis for putting together the survey prospect list that you see there with all those really neat Excel things. Up at the top there, below the text items, you see prospect cities north to south, and then underneath Snohomish, Monroe, and so forth is refs, 12, 18, 9, 22, 20. Those were the references in the interviews that you folks identified as being good prospects. What in effect this is saying that the one that stood out the most was Snoqualmie. That 22 of the 30 employees that had an opinion thought Snoqualmie was the best one to look at. That's 73%. Talk about a consensus. Wow. The second was North Bend. And in effect, 20 out of 30 there, 60% of the employees that had an opinion said North Bend was important to look at. Third was Monroe, 18 out of 30, 66%. So what this is saying that these three cities really stood out as being important ones to consider in terms of job matching, salaries, and ultimately workload. The other two cities, Snohomish and Woodinville, were mentioned by 12 people or 9 people, which is 40 and 30% of you, and that's still significant. In good salary studies, you need to have at least five cities to look at, or businesses or other organizations, because you need to come up with at least 3 matches for each job, 3 good matches. So I feel that with the 5, we were moving in the right direction. Originally, we included 2 others on the list, Sultan and Carnation. They had less people identifying them as good prospects. The problems we ran into those, one was the Teamsters thought that the Sultan and Carnation were not good models, but they were so very different from Duval. The second thing was that they're so much smaller. When I started getting into the web's information on the other cities, it jumped out to me that Sultan had only 12 people and Carnation had about 20 employees. That means that was something that was raising an alarm to me, because it showed some difference there. And the more I looked at it, what jumped out was that both of these cities are contract cities. The cities that we've got on that large matrix there, Snohomish, Monroe, Woodinville, Snoqualmie, and North Bend, are full-service cities. Snoqualmie and North Bend share police services, but they're still full-service cities. So I think we've got something there that's important, having breadth of services. Down on the second section there, where you see population, assessed valuation, and sales taxes. Traditionally, salary studies looked at comparability in terms of these population, valuation, and taxes. And you can see there that the population ranges from a low of 6,900 at North Bend up to a high of 19,000 at Monroe. What's not on the list there are the cities like Bothell or Bellevue, other cities that are so much larger. The assessed valuation, again, that information is from the Municipal Research Services Center here, and it's current as of 2019, shows a range of from 1.4 million at North Bend to 1.5 million, or 1.6 million at Snohomish, and then larger ones, Woodinville and Snoqualmie at 4 and 3.5 million. Taxes, the taxes range from a low of 2,500 up to a high of 7 million. So you've got there cities that are a little bit larger than Duval, but at the same time, they're not cities that are way small or way larger. I think these are ones that I'd like you to consider as being comparable. In this presentation, I don't think you need to vote to accept it. I don't think you need to make any resolutions. I think the whole purpose of the presentation is to show you what we've found so far and make sure that you're comfortable with the directions. What I want to do is avoid surprises, surprises at the end of the study. Traditionally, salary studies, the council people didn't get a chance to listen to the consultant or meet with the consultant until the very end of it. And that's a terrible way to spring things on policymakers. So what I'm trying to do is avoid that. Down on the bottom third of that worksheet, you can see staffing. And there you've got staffing from 44 and 42 at North Bend and Woodinville up to 110 and 107 at Snoqualmie. So again, we're not dealing with mega cities or anything like that. And we're hopefully able to find cities that have some matches that are comparable to the ones at Duval. The unions, I think there's unions in all of these organizations. I don't know for certain. It simply says not available. That's part of the things that we'll learn about as we continue the study. And the next step on all of this is to start getting the survey data. We worked very hard to put together some templates showing information about each job and some talking points to use. And we've worked hard too to develop a survey approach that we can do during COVID times. Traditionally, the best practice has been to Shanghai somebody like the finance director or the interim administrator and take that person, myself, and go sit down and do conversations around the table at each of the comparable cities. That results in getting very comparable information, and also information that everybody sits back and thinks, wow, glad I didn't have to do that. Appreciate the efforts. Can't do that with COVID, so what I want to do is a little bit different. The suggestion will be to ask the other cities over finance director, over their name on the letterhead, ask the other cities to send us their job descriptions, their organization charts, their collective bargaining agreements, their budget plans, their salary schedules, and take that information and sit down and for me to analyze it and come up with the matches that I think are pretty good. The risk to that is that my judgment is not nearly as good as somebody like a finance director or an HR director that's got long-standing ties with these cities. But I think if I take the first cut, I can reduce tremendously the amount of time that's required from the other organizations. And then I can send them the comparisons that I think make sense. And they can look at that and they can laugh and say, boy, did that consultant get it wrong? No, they'll look at that and give polish to it and kind of serve as the auditors on the comparison process. That's what we hope to bring back to you in a month, something like that. How that will work out in reality, how the timeline will work out in reality is hard to say given the COVID time. But this expeditious process, I did it recently for a parks agency over in Gig Harbor, and it worked very well. I think everybody appreciated the fact that they didn't have to spend an hour plus doing the comparisons around a work table. So that's how we've got to this point here, and I welcome questions. Most important, I want to thank the council people, the mayor, and each and every one of the employees that have been able to sit down and articulately talk with this consultant on the telephone, never having met or had real introductions, that's been a real appreciated effort on your part. So thanks a bunch. Questions, comments, suggestions?
Ross, thank you. Mike Remington.
Thank you.
I'll open it up for questions here. I did want to say I appreciate your work on this, appreciate the mayor helping move this forward. It's integral to us being able to not only do our negotiations, but certainly doing the workload analysis will be important for us to see where our shortcomings are and where our strengths are and what adjustments might need to be made during the budget process. Ross, I'm going to start off with a couple of questions, if you don't mind. It says full service. Can you help define what you call full service? I know that our city has water, wastewater. We have our own police department. And I'm not sure where the other cities stand, or if full service means they also have those as well.
Yes, the other cities have those or the equivalent. The equivalent being my way of putting a quotation marks around Snoqualmie and North Bend, which I understand share law enforcement functions. What I was looking for is to make sure they had police, public works, and finance, planning, and community development functions. That's what I meant by full service.
Do you know if Woodinville has their own police department, or do they contract with King County?
I don't know.
That might be something to take a look at. And so I think our finance director knows Dana worked there, so.
That would be a good source.
The reason that's important, one of the factors we looked at here was staff, and certainly if we're not including their police staff, they would have much larger staff if you were to incorporate, who they contract with and how many folks. Dana, do you know on Woodinville, since I asked the question, I thought maybe I'd have you answer it for me.
Yes, the city of Woodinville contracts with King County for police services.
So Ross, we might want to just take a look at that. I'm going to kind of jump in here with both feet. I'll just give you kind of my quick look. I love the fact that they're close by, so regional. They're kind of in our similar economic, if you will, but there are some really key differences, and I just want to highlight some of those. My own feeling is it would be nice to have a better balance of some smaller cities, and I realize we're trying to look at full service cities, and you can't match all the numbers, but I want to give you a few that are concerning to me. One of those is assessed valuation. If you just look at the average, take the 5 comparables and average what their assessed value is, their average is more than double what the city of Duval is, and some are 2 or 3 times, and that assessed valuation is a big part of it. Sales tax is another one. And again, if you just take the average sales tax revenues for those cities that we're looking at, they average 4 times as much revenue as the city of Duval. And again, these are just, it's hard to look at individual factors because you're looking at the entire package. But as examples, Snohomish is 4 times the revenues. Monroe is 5 times, Woodinville is 7 times. So those are fairly large differences. And again, it's an entire package. And I don't mind those that you've selected or are recommending, because I think that they're good cities, but it would be nice to have them balanced with other cities that look a little bit more like Duval or even smaller. Examples I think of are places like Burlington, Birch Bay, Stanwood, Pacific, Normandy Park. Now, I don't have your expertise and I haven't looked at all the details, so those may be off for other reasons. The other 3 things I looked at, population, there's only one of those that are smaller than our city. Assessed valuation comparisons, again, all of them are larger than the city of Duval. Sales tax comparison, all are larger than the city of Duval. It doesn't mean that we can't have them on the list, because I think that they're actually good cities to look at. But my own feeling is that you would balance out those larger cities that look like us with smaller cities that are also similar. Having been involved with negotiations a good part of my life, I've never had a union recommend smaller cities just because, well, many reasons. One of them is a lot of folks like to compare to larger cities that often have better resources and have higher salaries and benefits. We want our employees to be well compensated and have good benefits and flexibility. There's no question. So this isn't a matter of trying to stamp that out, but I think there's a balance, and it's so important when you're getting into negotiations to try to have comparables that look similar to us. So that's all I had, Ross. I don't necessarily need you to respond to all the things I mentioned, but my recommendation is that we would take a look at some smaller cities as well. I see some other hands up. Councilmember Napland.
Thank you so much, Mike. Our council member, Mayor Pro Tem Remington, I agree with so much of what you said, and I respect your experience and knowledge on this matter. I had similar things to mention. I really do think Sultan and Carnation are actually the most similar to Duval. They are bedroom communities. They have very little commercial and retail. They, the complexity of the infrastructure is very similar. I mean, we have, I think, three traffic lights in town. And, you know, if we look comparing ourselves to some of these other cities, North Bend has an outlet mall, I mean, and so much more commercial. And just think of, you know, what a large, complicated infrastructure you have in Monroe, Woodinville, Snoqualmie. It's just a completely different infrastructure, and the type of policing you do when you have that, you know, commercial core. Monroe has a Lowe's, a Fred Meyer's, a Walmart, you know, Woodinville has a Target. It's a very different city, those cities. But I do believe Carnation and Sultan are very similar to us. And since they are contracted, we would really have to subtract out our police force to compare number of employees. And when you do that, we are much more similar in staff size. And on the reverse, if you look at North Bend, their employee count does not include any police. And so if you added on the amount of police it would take to serve a city of that size with that much retail and commercial, you would have a much larger staff if you included the proportion of the shared police that Snoqualmie manages. So Snoqualmie has to do all of the finance related to the payroll, the administration of all of that. North Bend does not. North Bend just writes a check, and they handle everything in Snoqualmie. Also, Woodinville is the same. It's a contract city. If you thought about how much police would you need, I don't know the exact number, they contract once again. And if you added on the amount of police, it would not be an apples to apples. We really would not be a similar size staff at all. And so honestly, when I look at it, I feel like we are so similar to Carnation and Sultan versus these other cities, or at least they should be in the league. Like if you're going to use some that are all much higher and out of our league for finances, assessed value, you know, all these bigger cities that have way more resources than us, we need to balance it with some that are slightly smaller and have similar types of resources. We just don't have the economic engine that's the same. But I do think Carnation and Sultan, they're facing development pressures a lot. They're very similar. Anyway, I think, oh, and also Sultan and Carnation have water, sewer, storm. They're just very similar in, you know, how many traffic lights do they have? You know, it's a highway that runs through, there's a big main street. We are just very similar. Anyway, I would like to reconsider including those. And I was really puzzled when they were removed because one of my understandings from reading other cities' salary surveys is they always try to find a balance where if you want to create a salary survey and choose a median salary from this survey, you would want your city to be the median of all the different components. And we are not. Our assessed value is, like I said, less than half of the average of these cities. Our sales tax is less than a quarter. And so we're really comparing ourselves to cities that just have completely different resources and much larger staff, complex. You know, when you look at I'll just use an example. If you look at a director, it's, how many people report to them and how big is their budget? I would imagine, the infrastructure, that goes on in Monroe is completely different than what we have. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Sorry if it was a little bit lengthy, but I've actually thought a lot on this, and I've read other salary surveys, and I feel very strongly, and even some cities have it in their policy that you have to choose cities where you are the median. You have to be so many smaller and so many bigger and so many smaller assessed values. That, there is a way of doing this that is systematic, and I just feel like we do not represent the median of the cities selected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, very, very well done. Councilmember Langle, you had your hand up as well? No, I see a no. Other council members? Councilmember Brudnicki.
I remember in the interview we discussed this, but I guess my question is more, the difficulty of what we face as a city is the fact that we are located near these cities that, if I'm a person who's going to, say, work for someplace, and I can work at a Redmond for more pay to do essentially about the same type of job, how does a city like Duval attract that person to Duval? Yeah, I mean, that's to me what we struggle with when we're talking about compensation, for one. The other thing is that our demographics in the city has really shifted since I moved here 20-something years ago. I mean, I just walked through a luxury development, which I never thought that would even exist in Duval. When my house was built, Taylor's Ridge came in, that was the special development. And now, I feel like second rate after during that last development. So those kinds of things have really changed in our city. And does that play into, when you're a city that's developing this kind of structure, urban development, the type of staffing you need and the type of folks you need to accomplish what your vision plan said you were going to do with what your citizens say they want you to do, becomes, I think, way more complex. And even for a small city, the city, citizens have asked for special parks and features and enhancements and those sort of things. So, whereas I'm familiar with Salton, I go and hike out there where it doesn't have that same feel as Duval, so it's hard for me to try to compare that city with my city. It doesn't have the same sort of demographics as Duval, and it's certainly located further away as far as location goes from, the other urban areas around us that we compete with, I suppose. So I think trying to figure that out because of where we're uniquely located, surrounded by these other urban environments, and the changing demographics and the type of folks moving here now and what they expect from this city, all kind of plays into, I suppose, when you're looking at staffing and the type of expertise you need to deliver your full city management and such.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Brudnicki. Those are two important points. One is certainly our demographic. You do need to attract good employees and have an attractive salary benefit package and a workload that you can live with. And so those are definitely factors that have to be looked at that aren't necessarily on a chart all the time. Other council members with feedback? Councilmember McHenry.
I don't have much to add other than what you said, Mayor Pro Tem, and the points Councilmember Naplin brought up. I appreciated those. And if there is a way to keep some of those other two cities in, I feel like it would better balance us. I think Duval is very unique. I'm sure a lot of cities feel that way maybe, but for us, it's especially true when we start looking for other comparable cities. It's quite hard. So I think having those, what is it, Carnation and Sultan, especially with some of those other values like the sales tax, might help bring us a little closer to seeing some sort of better average where we're the middle and looking at those and where we need to be at.
Thank you. Mayor Okerlander, and then Councilmember Iyer.
Yeah, I just want to remind the council that part of the purpose of this is to plan for the future. And while the points are well taken about Sultan and Carnation, I do agree very strongly with Councilmember Brudnicki that they are not, they're not Duval. We are closest in feel and everything else to the other cities, and that we're not just looking at assessed value. What we're really trying to get at here is what is the workload analysis, how many employees does our city need to carry out the functions that we have and that we provide to the community. Then the next step is to plan our proper staffing levels for the future. So the salary part is one component of it. And if we're not thinking towards the future, knowing that we have over 80% of a development's 144 homes already sold before those buildings are even built, and recognizing that our population is going to continue to increase, if we're not looking at those details as well, we're being short-sighted and not getting the work done to plan for the future. So I just, I'm not making a judgment as to whether or not to include those other cities, but I just wanted to bring back and remind folks that that this project is much bigger than just looking at salaries. It's also about planning for the future and making sure that we have the data and the tools necessary to move the city forward in the long term, especially as we get towards financial planning. And I want to just also remind folks that, while the police department is included in this salary survey, our police department a few years ago did a comprehensive analysis as well and have a relatively set out plan that we don't expect to change very much with this newer updated information. But again, this isn't just about salary, it's about workload. It's about what our city needs to plan into the future to make sure that we finally get to a point where we're caught up and our directors aren't working 55 to 60 hours a week on a regular basis. So that's just not, and not their directors take on the work of those that don't get overtime. Our directors are working directors. So there's more than just population and services. And I think that's what makes looking at the salary side of this so difficult with comparables, is that there really is not a comparable city to the city of Duval. So to Councilmember Brudnicki's point, it's important to be looking at those cities that are most like ours, not just in dollars. And we aren't going to get cities like us in dollars unless we really dig low. But that we're also looking at the number of people we're serving, our infrastructure, and what we're providing to folks as part of that discussion when looking towards the future. Because if we don't, and we just continue to look at numbers, we're never going to get to where the city needs to be. We need to look at not just numbers, but the intangible side of these things as well. And our staff depend on it. When we just saw a huge presentation from the police department about the long-term efforts in succession planning, a lot of research went into that as well for comparables and trying to figure out, it wasn't just about the salaries. It's also about figuring out how you improve the culture to a point that people want to come and work for you, even though you're not able to provide the salary that Seattle's and other departments can. So there's other components that I just want to make sure that folks aren't losing sight of that are equally and to some extent will be more important than the actual salary itself.
Thank you, Mary. I think it was very important perspectives. We are looking at two separate things. We're looking at workload comparisons and then looking at salary. I don't feel like they have to be the exact same list. There's reasons they could be, but certainly our city is unique, and looking at the workload, I feel like is a little different. When you're negotiating, that's kind of a different thing. The PERC Commission lays out some pretty clear guidelines on things that you look at, and I think our consultant has done a really good job of lining those up. I get more concerned because some citizens at the end of the day have to pay for that, and we have to live within our revenues, and so that's the balance. In my heart, I'd like to be on top of that list and have the highest salaries and best benefits, but I realize that our citizens may not be able to pay for that. So that's the balance we're looking at here. I believe Councilmember Iyer, you had your hand up, sir, and then Councilmember Langle.
I just wanted to express I'm in line with the thinking of Councilmember Remington. His points are well taken and articulated better than I can, and along with Councilmember Napland as well. I appreciate her thoughts and her perspectives as both a council member and a citizen. And that's generally where my support would lie, to search for the ability to be in the median. Although we might have some big houses being built in Duval, there's still some of us small folk who live here. So that's what I'm thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Councilmember Langle.
One of the challenges for Duval is we're in King County. And so there's a certain job market that we are recruiting from, perhaps. But I also think that there's something about Duval that is unique and special, and that's why people have stayed working here. And one of the things that isn't really addressed, and I think should be addressed in the salary study, has to do with the tenure of our employees, because we have a pretty amazing tenure in our employees, and I think it's just something at a minimum to be acknowledged in the game plan. Our tax base, even if you trend it out with the new units, that's fine, but it's just one more piece of data as a point of comparison. So I don't want to discount it. At the same time, I think we have to understand something Councilmember Iyer has said on many occasions, which is, living within what we have. And the last point I would make is we've not ever really invested in big technology changes. And corporate America has done that. And that has allowed, after capital improvements, it has allowed some relief in terms of salary implications. And actually, our Director of Public Works has talked about this. He mentioned, I think, was a $340,000 one-time expenditure, which would result in staff savings and doing things like reading meters. The point here is that, the city can't operate the way it has in the past. We don't have the tax base. We're never going to compete with, some of these cities in King County. So we've got to somehow find a place at sort of that sweet spot that will work for us. And, public employees do have very good benefits. And so we have to think about that too. And I never want to discount the quality of life in Duval. We have a really great place to live and to work. So those are my additional comments. And otherwise, I agree with what has been said.
Thank you. Councilmember Hogue, I haven't called on you because you haven't had your hand up, but I wanted to make sure that Ross has an opportunity to hear from every council member. Do you have input for us?
Well, I tend to be in agreement. I know it's challenging in Duval for sure to try and come up with a comparable city. so I tend to agree with what's been said from Councilmember Naplin and the rest of the group. I really think that we need to find a balance. I think we do need to be looking at the salaries, and we can't, our city, I don't think our city can hold up to paying the same salaries as Monroe or Woodinville or Redmond. We just don't have the income. So yeah, so it's a challenge to come up with the right solution. But Councilmember Naplin said it well, so.
Great. Councilmember Holt, thank you. Councilmember McHenry and Councilmember Bernicki next.
Just one last thing for me, just as something the mayor was talking about looking to the future. And I agree. I just think looking at this now, most of them are stacked a little higher on the higher side for Duval. And I think what some people like Councilmember Naplin were saying is if we just add in those other two that are slightly lower, it balances a little better so that we're not aiming too high. And I mean, what's the worst that could happen looking at how the numbers change by adding those in, is we can relook at it one more time or say, this really skews the data and it doesn't look right. Should we take out Sultan? I don't know. I just think it'd be interesting to see it with those two cities included. And I think it would balance it a little better.
Thank you. Councilmember Bernicki.
I just wanted to clarify a little bit. So in regards to the complexity is the idea that we have a ball field, we invested in Main Street, we are putting in sidewalks, and we're sort of developing this community to a level that is definitely requiring way more investment, not just for the items, but for the people to build all these things and to manage these things. And if we think we can't pay for this and we can't pay the folks to do all this, and we're going to look at a comparable like Carnation or Sultan, we should seriously rethink then all the items we're putting in. And we should really even look at ourselves as council folks and say, hey, are we making too much money as well? Should we be making the same sort of salary those folks who sit in their legislative body make? I mean, we have to look at those cuts all across the board through everything. But I think that's what makes it so complex, because when I look back at what we've invested in over the last 12, 15 years and what the people have loved and asked for, we could have said no all those years and have nothing, but we made these investments. And so here we are. And I think that's something we really have to think about going forward for the future. You can't all of a sudden go backwards once you've moved forwards.
Well, we've got a couple of other hands up, so I'll call on two more. I just wanted to say our last item for finance, Dana, we're probably not going to get to. Mayor, with your approval, we'll move that last item to our city council meeting.
Absolutely.
For finance. This is a key topic. Ross, I just also want to say thank you for your patience in listening. I think I always like to give council opportunity to give feedback, and I think this has been very helpful. Mayor, I have your hand up, and then Councilmember Iyer. So Mayor Okerlander.
Yeah, and I just, and this is a great discussion, but I just also want to make clear that getting the information does not necessarily mean that you go with an average of what's in there. But getting the information gives us a realistic perspective of what we're looking at long term. And to Councilmember Bernicki's point, we still have the same, or we have fewer staff than we had in 2008. When you take out Carnation, police, and everything else, yet we have more infrastructure. And so I really feel we're not doing our job as elected officials if we're not looking at the realities of the situation. And I also want to make clear that no one is proposing living outside of our means of our budget or increasing taxes at any point. What we're trying to do is get the real information on what it costs and what it will cost to run a city long term with what we have. That's multiple components. It's the salary and workload analysis. If you have multiple people working dozens of hours of extra work every week, and it's all shoved on directors. The reality is you need more staffing or you need to cut the services that you provide. This information is going to help us with that long term, as well our capital facilities planning and our municipal financial planning. It all goes together, and we can't make long-term good decisions for the city and ask our community what they're willing to bear without getting all of this information. So to be clear, no one is proposing raising any kind of taxes or living outside of our means at this point. This is a part of a long-term conversation that the city has put off for 20 years that we have to have. So I just want to make it very, very clear to the council and the public that that is not being proposed at this time.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry if we missed that. That really is an important point. There was one other hand up. Was that Councilmember Iyer?
Yeah, you know, I think the comments that have been presented by council have been reasonable and not exceptional in their proximity to a median. So I'm not really sure why, and I also don't think, with the number of cities that are much larger than the city of Duval, I don't think the inclusion of these would drastically bring down the average. And I think, I mean, if we were talking about comparing exclusively to 6 cities that were 1,000 people or 2,000 people, but I think this is a little bit, to me, this feels indicative of a lack of ability to open to the concept that the council members are bringing to the table. And I find it exceptionally frustrating and tiresome. And I try to bring these thoughts and these concerns with, you know, thoughtfulness and, you know, I feel like there was some reasonable, considerable statements made, and I feel as though hopefully those can be heard. And that's, and I feel as though that I'm expressing frustration that is felt by other council members. So I would hope that we can move on. I think it seems as though we have a clear understanding of where everyone stands on this. So I really don't want to I don't want to be lectured anymore. So, and that's, I'm getting to my, I had a really long day today. And so I'd like to, if we don't have anything new to say, I think we all know where we stand. Let's move on.
Councilmember Remington, I would just like to address the personal comments there. As I've made very clear with council, I feel that this is a very good conversation. I have made no comments as to whether or not Ross should include or not include those cities. Simply, I was providing the council with information that we discussed during this. So I apologize if you feel lectured for me providing additional information and making sure council has the information through the whole process.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Hurt, do I see your hand up, sir?
Yes, thank you. I just had a couple things. One is, I guess I'm curious as to the timing of all this study. You know, we do have 2 union contracts going into negotiations this year that expire at the end of this year. So far, this has been a 6-month project. And my other thought is, you know, I've been doing this for 25 years. Steve Winichewski, 20 years. Mayor Pro Tem, over 40 years. I have yet to go into a union negotiation and not sit down across from the union and negotiate the contract cities that are used in that contract. So how does this play into that? That's my question.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Ross, you've been patient listening to us. I'll turn the floor over to you. We've got just about 3 minutes left before we have to get off and head to our council meeting. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. I've got 3 pages of notes reflecting your comments. The emphasis being on making sure there's a balance, making sure that the cities that we're looking at have the right number of, have an appropriate number of stoplights, that they, and I don't mean that facetiously, it didn't come out right, and that we don't go overboard on Monroe or Woodinville, and that perhaps the inclusion of Sultan and Carnation would be a real plus in terms of enhancing the balance. The purpose of the study is not to give answers to the negotiators or to not to give answers. It's to provide a factual basis of information regarding compensation. So what I'd like to do is talk some more with Dana and Laura about how to proceed, and maybe going back to the original progress report, which included Sultan and Carnation in it, and providing 2 sets of numbers when we get done. One, a survey finding for all of the organizations, and then a survey finding without the Sultan and Carnation. Something like that, trying to be creative without going up to Birch Bay or over to Burlington. And as much as I like Stanwood, keeping it east side if we can. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time, your thoughts, and most important, what you do for your communities.
Well, Ross, thank you so much. This was very helpful tonight. You know, Councilmember Brudnicki brought up a point that I think I want to underline before we quit, and that's complexity. We have a very complex city compared to most of these others. Our staff, our employees, they are our best asset. They're the ones that are getting all the work done for our citizens and help this be the kind of city we want. So we don't want to lose that perspective either as we're looking at this. And to answer the chief's question, certainly the union and the negotiators sit down and work out those comparables. So that's another step here. I think this would help in that process, but certainly it's a separate formal process. Well, thank you, Council. With that, we're going to adjourn, and for our citizens here, you're welcome to join us at our City Council meeting starting at 7 o'clock in about 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone.